Hey everyone, let's talk about active versus passive EQs. All right, so this video is basically just going to be me talking about my understanding of active versus passive EQs. So this is the information that I've been told, the information that I've figured out over the years. I'm sure this is not going to be a comprehensive list by any means, so please feel free to add to whatever I'm saying in the comments below. I love learning more. I feel like most of the people that watch this channel love learning more about audio stuff. So just keep that in mind. It's not a comprehensive list. It's just kind of me chatting about what I've learned so far. So equalizers, EQs, we use them to adjust the frequency balance in audio. We have active EQs and we have passive EQs. And then it's good to keep in mind that for any type of EQ hardware that we talk about, there's also going to be plugins. So software that's emulating that kind of idea or something similar, right? So we have hardware equalizers, hardware EQs, and then we also have plugins that are doing oftentimes something pretty similar. So when we talk about active versus passive EQs, we could be thinking about software, but what I'm really thinking about is the hardware versions, the versions that kind of started it all, so to speak. That's my understanding of a good way to think about it. I don't know. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about while I'm talking about active versus passive EQs, just so you know. And just keep in mind that the software version, it's just using algorithms to adjust the sound, so it's just a little bit different mechanism, but oftentimes it's the goal's the same or similar, right? So to start, active EQs, this might be kind of obvious to some of you guys, but they get the name active from the fact that they use active electronic components. So when we talk about audio, sometimes you'll hear active versus passive thrown around, like when we're talking about speakers, for example, studio monitors, stuff like that. And all that really means is when something's a passive electronic component, it doesn't require an external power source to function. So something like a resistor, whereas an active electronic component or electrical component, which word is the better word there? What are you supposed to use? They're technically different words. Anyway, when something is, what was I talking about? Active electronic components, those require an external power source. So something like a transistor, they actually need an external power source to be applied to it for it to function, for it to actually adjust whatever the electricity is that's flowing through the device, right? So active versus passive. Active EQs are using active electronic components to adjust the sound. And it's doing that by adjusting the electricity that's passing through the device. When we talk about analog audio, that's just variations in voltage. It's electricity. So that might be more detail than I need to go into today. But let's see. So active EQs. So active EQs, they use active electronic components and they tend to be smaller and less expensive in general. They're, it's not a hard and fast rule, but just in general, they tend to be smaller and less expensive is my understanding. So what I've been taught for how an active EQ actually works is that it's taking a specific frequency band and it's creating a feedback loop and feeding back that frequency band back into the system, right? Whenever we talk about feedback, it's always the output of the system is going back into the input for the same system. So that's all feedback ever is. So in the case of active EQs, what they're doing is they're creating a feedback loop with a specific frequency band, and that allows them to boost that frequency band. But kind of as a rule, active components tend to make more noise. So that's something to keep in mind with active EQs. And then the other thing that I would keep in mind is that because it's doing the feedback loop thing to boost certain frequency bands, you might get phasing issues, right? So whenever you take the output of a system and feed it back into the input to create feedback, sometimes there can be a bit of a delay in that feedback process. And so you might get phasing issues depending on the device. It's just something to keep an ear out for. But then the cool thing about active EQs that I've been taught is that they tend to, as a general rule, allow you to make more extreme boosts and cuts. So that's something that's fun about them that can be a bonus, right? All right, so let's move on to passive EQs, passive equalizers. So, like we talked about with active EQs, a lot of this is just kind of be the opposite, so to speak, but they use passive electronic components, which means they tend to make less noise. They tend to have a lower noise floor, which makes them great for purposes like mastering audio, right? A lot of mastering engineers will like passive EQs a little bit more as a general rule, right? They also tend to be bigger and more expensive. Again, that's just a general rule. Depending on what models you're comparing, that might not always hold, but they tend to be bigger and more expensive. And, you'll hear audio nerds talk about how they love the sound of passive EQs. That's because of the way they're designed, right? Passive components, the way it boosts the frequencies, stuff like that. It just tends to sound a little different than active EQs, especially once you dig into it a little bit more. So one thing that I think is really interesting and cool about passive EQs and how they work is the way that they actually adjust the frequency bands when you're using it. So in theory, a passive EQ can only apply a cut to a given frequency band. You can't boost any frequency band. So they don't do the same thing as active EQs where it's a feedback loop and you're boosting. What it does instead is, let's say you want to boost a certain frequency range, it's going to actually cut every other range except for the one that you're boosting. And so it cuts that stuff and then raises everything up evenly using an amplifier. So what you're actually doing is you're cutting everything and then raising everything up. And it just ignores the frequency band that you wanted to boost, so to speak. I hope that makes sense. But that's how they operate. I think that's really cool. It's really interesting. It's kind of weird. I don't know. I thought it was kind of cool. And we often talk about reducing frequency bands. We'll use the word attenuation, right? That just means we're reducing the levels on something. So a lot of times when people talk about passive EQs, they'll talk about how it attenuates whatever the frequency bands are that you're not boosting and then raises everything up. And that's how it does a boost. Otherwise, it just cuts. And I figure knowing this stuff also helps you decide if you're reaching for a plugin that's emulating a specific type of physical hardware, for example. It can help you decide which one to reach for. If you're mastering, maybe reach for a plugin that is designed to mimic a passive EQ, for example, right? So I think it's useful information to know. I just hit the table. I think it's useful information to know. So, if you have a hardware EQ, take a look at it. Find out if it's active or passive. A lot of you guys that have hardware EQs probably already know that about your device, but it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to look into, to know, and then it helps you decide how and when to use your device, right? So I just thought it was kind of interesting. I thought I'd talk about that today. So I hope you guys liked it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'd appreciate all of that stuff. And I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Cato Noise. We've really been focusing on the Discord server lately there. I have some merch on a Threadless store. It's cato.threadless.com. And I recently posted a family and friends discount on the Patreon for Patreons to use if they want to get anything that's on there. Yeah. And I come out with new videos every Wednesday, and thank you for watching. Okay. It's raining outside and it's freezing. I mean, it's like below 70. I think. I'm pretty sure it's below 70. So it's really cold. It's raining outside, and I don't know. I don't know why I'm like justifying why I picked this as a topic today. I think I think I like really spent more time trying to justify why I picked this as a topic today. Maybe I'm just feeling self-conscious or something. I don't know. But I hope you guys liked it. It's raining a lot outside, so hopefully everything turned out okay with this recording. It's like pouring outside. It's very unusual for San Diego, but we needed it. So I kind of like the rain too. I like getting cozy and like baking stuff and being cozy. I don't know. Okay. Okay, bye.